Hi, I'm Harriet and welcome to another watercolour tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at a series of really cute illustrations based on things under the sea. And as we're still in the fairly early stages of beginning watercolour, I'm going to be looking at doing illustrations using a single colour each time. So grab your paint and paper and let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start off by using a little bit of equipment that's not normally in my watercolour kit. We've got our compass, and it's because when I paint a starfish I need to have a little guide, because I find it very hard to paint something that's like a five-pronged star, but if I've done a bit of prep like this, then I've got a guide. So I've got that central dot. There we go, and I can draw myself a lovely shape that I know all the legs of that starfish are sort of sticking out in the same manner, and then I can do a nice wobbly outline with my pencil that pretty much takes all that into consideration. And then what I will do is, I've got this, it's called a putty rubber, so it's sort of squidgy. I then rub out most of what I drew, because watercolour, once it's painted over pencil, makes it quite difficult for pencil to be rubbed out. It's not impossible, but it's quite hard. So there we are, we've got our lovely faint star shape. And then I have woken up some permanent rose. Here we go, artist quality tube permanent rose, Winsor & Newton today. And I'm using two rounded point brushes. I've got the size 2, which is quite large, and then I've got the 4/10, this one, and I'm going to start with this, and I'm going to be looking at unpainted space today, negative space. And what that means is how we can use the area of watercolour that's not been painted and sort of blend around it to make some really cool textures. So we're starting off by painting a series of shrinking bubbles down the end of that starfish leg, and then I'm coming back, and this brush has just been wetted once again. All I'm doing is using the colour that came off those central pink bubbles, and these circles are just getting increasingly smaller. And then just a slightly wet brush, but again not too much, just going delicate here. I'm just drawing out the colour that was sort of lurking there already in that pigment. Okay, drawing it out, and then get a little bit of colour. And I just want it to just touch. Yeah, that's awesome. And I've just waggled the brush a bit along the dry edge, and it's given me a nice slightly gnarly edge to my starfish. Okay, so again I'm going to get a tiny bit of colour on this time, because this side may have dried up a little bit, and I'm just going to repeat what I did. Whoops, come on, little rounded point brush. Sometimes when you're doing really tiny little circles, and sometimes if your brushes are quite well used, which mine are, you can get a stray hair that doesn't play ball. Okay, happy with that. So we've picked up the colour a little bit from those central circles, but also we had a little bit more on the brush, and then a wet but not sopping wet brush, just going to extend out what little bit of colour was there on those little balls. There we go, that's nice. And then a bit more pink that is going to just touch that wetness in the middle there, but also create a nice gnarly outer edge. So that is what we're going to be doing to create our starfish here. Now we're going to be moving on to the next circles. Make sure they all link up, those circles. They all want to be touching each other, and they can be as sort of uneven and wobbly as possible, but just make sure they follow along that central line of the starfish leg, because that sort of sensible foundation. So now clean wet brush, just picking up the colour here. yeah, that foundation you've done by doing a really even circle with the compass and then an accurate sort of set of lines just allows for the illustration work you do on top to be really quite sort of wiggly and wobbly, and it'll still work because you've done good foundations. Now it's still too wet, that brush. There we go. There we go, and we'll just fill in, and then I'm going to grab a bit of colour and just paint along that edge, and the colour is just going to blend very gradually. There we go. Circles along the other side, and again, when I'm doing my second row of littler circles, I like to pick up a tiny bit of paint on the brush just because it's harder, especially on a hot day like today. So I'm doing this on one of the last days in May, and in the UK 2020 we've not had rain for a very long time, so things are getting a bit dry over here, and it also means that watercolour dries very fast indeed, which can be very helpful, to be honest, especially when you're filming videos. Okay, so that's been done, and then a little bit of the stronger pigment along the edge there. Just blend it all in, and this is starting to look really nice and characterful. And let's keep going. Now, I know that I could turn this into a bit of a edited sort of lapsed time, sped up painted video, and I enjoy watching my fair share of those various things, but one of the things I've always found with watercolour is take some time, and even if you're just watching this and not painting along, if you're just sort of watching it for something to do, it's only about, well, it's not that long as opposed to sort of how many minutes and hours there are in a day. So I encourage you to just sort of take some time out and just sit and watch and relax watching this, rather than worrying too much about sort of fast forwarding things. I mean, there's definitely going to be times that we will need to edit in either a little speed up of time or an edit where, say, I'm waiting for paint to dry, and there will definitely be times like that. There may even be one in this video coming up, but on the whole, yeah, I like to try and do things in real time as much as possible, just because it's nice to be in the moment and take a bit of time, I think. I also like to have a chat to you guys. As you can see, sometimes the watercolour likes to behave and blend into each other, and sometimes it sort of wants to do its own thing. And for me, I'm all right with that. See, I'm just sort of neatening up a few of those circles as I go back and see them. Whoops-a-daisy. Right, wet brush, not too wet. Just picking up that tiny bit of colour that's already on the page. So often I will say, look, you don't need any more colour, there's loads on the page there. Just more water will do the trick. There we go. So I'm just keeping those little circles alive, not allowing them to dry out too much before putting that nice gnarly pink edge with the more concentrated watercolour. Okay. I'm really enjoying the colour palette that I've got chosen for this little series of under the sea watercolour shapes. It reminds me of sort of ice cream sorbet shades at the beach. I mean, this is quite raspberry ripple, I guess, if I was going to start naming these after ice cream flavours. Raspberry ripple's an absolute favourite of mine. I feel like we don't see raspberry ripple enough featuring as a flavour in things, but my goodness, I think strawberries and cream kind of wins out every time. But raspberry ripple's my favourite. Okay, so wet brush, but not too wet, so I've got my kitchen roll there as always. so I can very easily blot the brush. So it's just important to try not to get your wet large brush disturbing those little white dots that you've just created from not painting them. Okay, and a bit more paint, we'll just pick that up. And here come our second row of circles. So each leg has got a central row of circles and then either side slightly smaller. And they're all just gradually tapering down to very little at the end there. Okay, gonna even blot that off. Don't even need that much water. Picking up the edge there. There we go. Just allowing that to blend in. And then a bit more pink. Oh, see, it's so dry that hasn't even taken. There we go, lovely. And the last one, the last leg. So in this episode today, we've got the starfish, and then we're going to be doing a little curled up seashell. And then in the next episode, we're going to be looking at the scallop shell, which is one of my favourites. And then finishing off with some coral and seaweed in the next episodes. And these will all be coming to you gradually. And then by the end, you'll have a lovely seascape to paint and these really cute little illustrations. I enjoyed painting these little under the sea scenes. There's just something really delightful about them. Now, it's very important to note that I complete each leg of this starfish before carrying on to the next one. And that's because you wouldn't get as seamless a blend, and you know, we haven't even got a seamless blend all the way through, but we're getting as good as we can because I'm not allowing the water to completely seep in and dry up. Oh, lovely, look at that. Nice. And the last one, a little bit of pink. Here we go. Just a few little circles. Yeah, so I'm not sort of say doing all the bobbles, all the circles, and then coming back at them with a wet outline and trying to blend them in, because they would have just been too far gone. They would have seeped into the paper and it would be very hard indeed to get a seamless look. And the whole point with the seamless look means that these little bobbles of unpainted space just look like they've just appeared on the page with very little effort. And that's what we like to try and give the impression of with watercolour, is very little effort. Lovely. Okay, and we're going to finish that off with a nice bit of concentrated pink. So there is our gnarly little bobbly starfish, and you can see once it's dried there are certain bits like here where that big bit of pink hasn't quite blended into our little circle, so you can go in with a wet brush and just help it along a little bit. Blend that in. There isn't too much actually. I think I'm really pleased with that. So we're going to move on to a nice curly seashell. So again, using my pencil for a nice bit of guidance, I'm going to draw a sort of slightly curved diagonal line. And then from that, I'm going to start drawing sections of my seashell. So I'm drawing a little sort of, I don't know, looks like a sort of scallop shell on its side a bit, doesn't it? As a little squashed teardrop shape, and then another shape, another curve, and then if I just extend that line up a little bit, a little sort of bit of soft serve on top, a little bit of extra shape. I'm just going to fill that one out a little bit, make that a little bit more bulbous, and I'm happy with that. But yet again, move that off, I'm going to rub it out with my pencil, with my rubber, because I don't want too much of this. Okay, now we're going to use the turquoise. This is Cobalt turquoise, another beautiful fresh colour, And again, I've got it in here. I've woken it up in my palette. It's a tube of paint, and we're going to be working in just this colour again. So first off, I'm actually going to paint in sections, these little shell sections, and I'm going to start by filling in this bottom most bulbous section with water. But I'm not going to be overloading it with water. I'm just filling in, there we go. Because I want it to be slightly wet, but I don't want the paint to travel so far that we never get any sense of shape and form. So the good thing is, because my water's ever so slightly pink, you can probably just about see where the wetness is there. Now I don't want my paint to be too strong, so I'm gonna just sort of wake it up and get a slightly sort of dilute amount on my larger brush, and I'm going to follow the curve of my seashell. Lovely. And I'm going to paint lines in this fairly dilute paint, and you can see it's already drying up quite well. Really, really nice and dilute paint that is just softening. The edges are just softening because the water is there on the page, and then for just an outward edge, there we go. And yeah, let's just do a few dabs of a bit more concentrated colour just down there. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? And that will just float up whilst we paint the rest of it. Okay, and you can see those lines I've done have just created a lovely fat rounded shape there. Okay, so we're going to now wet this here. Now normally I'd say, oh gosh, you know, this is all going to blend into each other because it's wet here, wet there, but because we've used a very conservative amount of water, and again it's just a small amount again here, we can pretty much get away with not disturbing what's just gone on underneath. So I'm going to get a bit of paint out again, and I'm going to just follow the edge round, and just be careful when you come to the bottom there. There we go. Now the beauty of this is because the page itself here is dry, but the page inside is wet, we get a lovely crisp edge and an outline. And then we're just going to paint in various lines and outlines. Gorgeous. Very pleased with that. Another tiny bit more water in here, but just not too much now. In fact, I'm going to blot my brush off, especially because it took a much shorter time to paint that second shape, so the paint hasn't had time to fully seep in. Yeah, you can see we've got the tiny bit of a blend there. Picking up some paint on my brush, and let's go again. Outer edge, lovely, and follow it round, and then it starts to start curling the other way, and the other way, and the other way. And my lines are a little bit thinner now, but they're still with the same larger size 2 brush I've got here. And then we can see here that we've still got a nice little bit of definition between the different bulbous shell shapes, even though we've been working with wet on wet. We're just working with very minimal wet on wet and taking advantage of the fact that it's a nice dry day. Okay, now because this one's such a small shape, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dab a blob of paint up at the top, a little bit how we did at the bottom. Okay, clean that brush off, dry the brush off, And then I'm just going to draw down the paint on the outlines there, and maybe just a few, but we're not going to get a huge amount of definition. Okay, so there you have it. You have a lovely curly seashell using a really, really pale, delicate use of wet onto the wet. And you can see here, we've still got our faint pencil line, but that will be able to be rubbed off once we're completely dry. And then over here, we've got a much more bold, striking shape using just, again, a single colour, allowing sort of exciting blends to happen, but also a little bit of negative space. And also this one is completely dry now, so I can use my rubber to rub out that shell there, and you can see the pencil's gone, so really nice results. So we'll be on to the scallop shell next, but for now this should be quite a fun little shell shape to begin with. And there we have a cute little starfish and a curly shell. So that's the first in our series of doing some under the sea shapes. We've got a scallop shell to come and some really cool coral and seaweed, so look out for those. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button, and also comment below, let me know how you felt it went. Maybe not, and then yeah, it's always good to hear what you think and what you'd like me to do in future episodes. And of course, if you haven't yet, do hit the subscribe button and you won't miss a further video. Alright, thanks a lot, bye!